According to the ACLED Conflict Index, 50 countries in the world are either currently at war or debilitated by ongoing violence. At the beginning of 2024, 1 out of 6 humans were exposed to armed conflicts in one way or another. And what's most concerning is that the level of violence worldwide has been steadily increasing in the past few years. 2023 witnessed a 12% increase in unrest over 2022 and a 20% increase over 2019. Most of us are acutely aware of two main conflicts going on at the moment: the war between Ukraine and Russia and the conflict between Israel and Hamas-led Gaza. But the media doesn't give much coverage to conflicts in many other parts of the globe. So much of the bloodshed continues with little attention. The truth is, much more is going on than you probably realize. And diplomatic tensions, international conflicts, and civil wars have continued to heat up in the past few months. So in this video, I will go over as many ongoing conflicts as possible and open your eyes to the many ill-known tragedies of the world. And as the video moves along, I will share less and less known wars that the media fails to cover. So, arguably, the third most well-known conflict is the one between Armenia and Azerbaijan over the Nagorno-Karabakh region. Since the days of the Soviet Union, which both countries were a part of, Russia has long acted as the mediator between these two small countries. But with Russia's attention now elsewhere, the delicate balance has been upended. Despite US efforts to mediate in June of last year, the self-proclaimed Republic of Artsakh ruled the Armenian-majority enclave of Nagorno-Karabakh since the 1990s, which, as you can see, is completely surrounded by Azerbaijan. Russian peacekeepers have protected the Lashin corridor, a vital route for supplies like food and medicine flowing from Armenia, but after they left, Azerbaijan took advantage and blockaded the corridor in December 2022, causing severe shortages.
Azerbaijan is launching military action in the Nagorno-Karabakh region.
On September 19th, 2023, Azerbaijan sent as many as 100,000 troops to invade the Nagorno-Karabakh region. In the span of a mere 24 hours, Azerbaijani troops completely overtook it, and Artsakh officially ceased to exist on January 1st, 2024. With Armenia weakened, threatened by neighboring Turkey, and abandoned by its international allies, Azerbaijan remains officially at war with the country. Analysts fear that the situation could explode soon, as Azerbaijan is demanding a corridor through Armenia to connect the exclave of Nakhchivan to the rest of the country. However, a little farther to the east lies one of the longest ongoing border disputes in recent history, between the ex-Soviet republics of Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. The conflict made news in September 2022 when new casualties along the border drove fears that instability could spiral now that a distracted Russia could no longer mediate the dispute. The conflict continues to claim occasional victims with intermittent skirmishes, but Turkey has stepped in to try and negotiate a border agreement deal between the two countries. Now, let's move to Africa, where regional instability in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of the Congo threatens to become a regional conflict. Between 2022 and 2023, a dangerous political crisis spilled over the border into neighboring Rwanda. See, over the past decade, ethnic Tutsi rebels in the east of the country formed a rebel military group against the national government. In June 2022, the Congolese government accused neighboring Rwanda of backing the rebels, which was later confirmed true by UN experts. The situation has led to border clashes between the DRC and Rwanda in 2024, and the situation continues to deteriorate rapidly. After Burundi accused Rwanda of actively training rebels of the same Red Tabara movement that tried to overthrow the Burundian government in 2015, many fear the war will spread into the greater East Africa region. Another potential international war could break out between Venezuela and Guyana after Venezuelans voted to claim a huge chunk of Guyana's territory as their own and send troops to the border. War is not always a conflict between two nations. You see, civil wars are happening in all different parts of the world. Yemen has been involved in a brutal civil war since 2014 between the Saudi-backed government coalition and the Iran-backed Houthi rebels. The situation is already dire enough, with as much as 75% of the population left in need of humanitarian aid and close to half of Yemen's population currently facing the risk of starvation due to the ongoing conflict. Right now, the country is sparsely controlled by a handful of different factions. Beyond the Houthi rebels controlling the capital Sana'a and the area surrounded, and the official government controlling much of the eastern side of the country, Sadly, jihadist groups are taking advantage of local dire situations here and there. In addition to them, the STC, otherwise known as the Southern Transitional Council movement, is profiting from support by the UAE to seize control over the southern portion of the country to claim its independence, pretty much like Yemen was split before it united in 1990. Yemen's civil war has yet again made the news, as the Houthis have been firing rockets across the Middle East against Israel in retaliation for the military operations against Hamas, which is part of the same Shia Muslim coalition supported by Iran elsewhere in the region. This is contributing to disruptions to global trade in the focal point of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, forcing cargo ships around Africa to deliver goods to Europe. In response, Western forces like the US and UK have summoned attacks on the Houthi military targets. Another civil war carries on in Myanmar, where the military junta returned to power in a brutal coup in 2021. The situation heated up in October 2023 when different rebel factions brokered a deal to unite against the military government in a joint offensive operation that has now displaced more than 350,000 people from their homes. Moving back to Africa, the small country of Cameroon has also suffered a civil war since 2016, when separatists from the Ambazonia region declared their independence. See, Cameroon was once split into a French and British colony. The result is that the Ambazonia region is English-speaking, while the rest of the country speaks French. This crisis is called the Anglophone War, as the English-speaking minority fights against the wealthier and more powerful Francophone majority. Elsewhere on the continent, Sudan is being torn apart by civil war, where military factions ripped open old wounds when they staged a coup in 2021. The UN is seriously concerned about the stability of the country, as millions of people have been displaced to refugee camps and growing clashes threaten to spill over into South Sudan, which gained its independence from Sudan in 2011. Perhaps one of the worst situations in Africa is currently in Ethiopia's Tigray region. Already one of the poorest areas of the country, Tigray is scarred by past conflicts that led to the independence of Eritrea in the 1990s. The war with Eritrea left a strong Ethiopian military presence in the Tigray region, which is home to the Tigrayan people who have long enjoyed a degree of autonomy. However, the tide changed in 2021 when the current Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's Prosperity Party gained a large majority in the Ethiopian parliament and called for more centralization of power. Tigray's subsequent rebellion has been severely repressed, pushing 3.5 million people, or more than half of its entire population, to the brink of starvation. Tensions had already come to a boiling point in November 2020 when the Ethiopian Federal Forces invaded the Tigray capital, Mekelle. They installed an interim governor after the previous administration authorized new parliamentary elections despite a ban by Prime Minister Abiy due to the pandemic. More recently, Abiy Ahmed has decided to divert international attention from Tigray by threatening neighboring Eritrea just 6 years after the last standing peace deal between the two countries, which had earned him a Nobel Peace Prize. The issue at hand is Eritrea's independence made Ethiopia a landlocked country, denying it access to the global trade opportunities of the Red Sea. Ethiopia is now threatening to regain sea access by force. For the time being, Ethiopia is seeking to establish a port in neighboring Somaliland, a de facto independent region of Somalia. If this idea is successful, war could spread to the entire Horn of Africa and beyond, as Ethiopia's promise to formally recognize and protect Somaliland in return for the deal has irritated neighboring Egypt and Somalia. The list of other civil wars and unrest is unfortunately quite long, so we will quickly mention the recent coups in Niger, Gabon, Burkina Faso, Sierra Leone, and Mali. There is reasonable suspicion that Russia is behind some of these geopolitical shifts of power in Africa, or that they are at least taking advantage of ongoing tensions between several African countries and France. Western neglect and lack of involvement in the region has paved the way for terrorist or nationalist groups to overthrow pro-Western governments or long-established dictatorships. The disappearance of the Russia-backed Wagner mercenary group has opened the door to other influences in the Sahel region, as China expands its presence in the area. Lastly, Central America's affliction of organized crime and cartels is getting out of hand, as conflicts develop into proper civil wars according to many analysts. Honduras has declared war against gangs that are causing unrest on a national level. Haiti's government has lost control over public safety as gang conflicts overwhelm the capital Port-au-Prince, causing more than 5,000 30,000 civilian deaths in 2023 alone. The UN has declared an emergency and will be sending troops to keep the peace. Similarly, Mexico's long-standing problem with drug cartels is reaching a point of no return, which pushed President Joe Biden to temporarily send 1,500 troops to patrol the US border and tackle the resulting migrant crisis. As a result, Mexico has been labeled the fourth most violent country in the world, despite formally not being part of any war. On the other side of the region, drug cartels have been reportedly funding civil unrest and gang movements in Ecuador, effectively crippling the central government's stability and capacity to maintain order in some regions. The one bright spot in the region is El Salvador, where President Bukele seems to have fixed the country's unbelievably horrible gang problem with authoritarian measures like throwing anyone suspected of gang membership in jail. The country's homicide rate dropped from 1,147 to 556 in the past few years. But is giving up freedom for security worth the price? I'll let you decide that, but we have more to worry about than ongoing conflicts and civil wars, because many disputes threaten to become tomorrow's wars. Taiwan recently elected the most pro-independence leaders since it became a democracy, and Chinese President Xi Jinping responded with a threat in his New Year's speech, claiming that China will surely be reunified. The threat of conflict in the Asia-Pacific region comes at an inopportune moment, as the US and its allies are occupied with Ukraine and distracted by internal politics. Japan is preparing for the worst and plans to rearm itself to a level unseen since World War II. Now, let's move on to Cyprus, the Mediterranean island partially occupied by Turkey since 1974, where recent incidents have pushed Turkey Cypriots to attack UN peacekeepers inside the buffer zone, splitting the island in two. This attack has been condemned as a serious escalation, pushing Cyprus's president to announce an increase of military spending by 2% of its GDP. Lastly, many are concerned of a potential spillover of the Israel-Gaza conflict, especially as Israel targets Iran-backed Hezbollah fighters inside Lebanon's territory, all while Western allies target Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen. Everybody is watching closely for Iran's response, which has been surprisingly tempered so far, except for a surprise ballistic attack in Erbil, Iraq. Erbil, the capital of Iraq's autonomous Kurdish region, is home to both a US consulate and an alleged Israeli spy base, but the chances that major Middle Eastern players like Iran will enter the conflict are heightened by recent crises at its eastern borders. 2023 ended with Iranian border forces skirmishing with the Afghani Taliban over border disputes. After the New Year's, Iran and Pakistan started attacking each other's border provinces with ballistic missiles in a worrying sudden act of hostility. The conflict seems to have been resolved for now, as the aim on both sides was to attack groups acting in both countries towards the independence of the cross-border region of Balochistan. Still, tensions remain high as neither Pakistan nor Iran wants to appear weak or accommodating in such a tense period for geopolitical relations. Okay, so that's it. We tried to fit as much as we could into this video, but we know that we might have missed something. So if you think we left anything out, please let us know in the comments down below. But that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.